There is a saying that it takes a village to raise a child. It's implied but not stated that it matters who's in your village. Whether you're a parent or not, who's in your village matters. So today we're going to talk about Esther. If you ask most people what the story of Esther is about, they'll tell you it's a story about courage. And they're right, it is. But if you look closer, you'll see that Esther's courage did not grow in isolation. It was formed, strengthened, and sustained by community. Esther did not stand alone. The Jewish people mourned together, they fasted together, they prayed together, and because of that, one woman's act of courage became a nation's deliverance. One of the greatest lies that we can believe is that we're supposed to handle life on our own. But the story of Esther teaches us something different. God often prepares, strengthens, and positions us through community. And if you're going to step into your purpose, you don't need to do it alone. So we're going to set the stage for our story. We're going to do a quick recap of Esther chapter 1 through 3. So the king had a really big kingdom, from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, and he hosted a massive dinner party for a bunch of super important and influential people. Simultaneously, his wife, Queen Vashti, hosted a party for the wives. Day 7 of the party, the king says to Queen Vashti, "Come, make an appearance at the men's party." And she says, "No." And as the trendsetter that she is, all the women in the kingdom start rebelling against their husbands as well. So the king says to his advisors, "What should we do?" And they said, "Find a new wife." So the advisors go out and they find all the pretty virgins and bring them to compete for the king. You know the story, The Bachelor? This is the origin story for that plot line. So while this is happening in the palace, Esther is living as a common Jew with her cousin Mordecai, who has raised her, and she is selected to compete. And before she leaves for the competition, Mordecai says, "Don't tell anybody you're a Jew." So fast forward, she wins the favor of the king, becomes the queen, yay! But she's also a Jew in hiding. While all of this is happening, the king has a friend, one of his advisors, Haman. He's the bad guy. We don't like him. And he liked it when he would walk around town and everyone would bow down to him. And he would walk by and cousin Mordecai would not bow because he was a Jew. Haman found out that Mordecai was a Jew and set out to destroy all of the Jews. So Haman went and told the king, "Hey, there's a group of people. They believe different things. They obey different laws." And the king signed off on having them all destroyed on a super specific day. He sent out notices so everyone knew what was going to happen. Everyone's prepping for their coming destruction. And this is where we pick up. Esther chapter 4, verse 1 through 3 says, "When Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city. And he cried out with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. And in every province, wherever the king's command and his decree reached, there was a great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and lamenting, and many of them lay in sackcloth and ashes." So when Mordecai learned about Haman's decree, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and cried out loudly in the city. And the Bible says that throughout the provinces, the 127 provinces, the Jewish people were also fasting, weeping, and mourning together. This was not a private pain. This was a shared grief. Community helps us recognize when something really matters. Because when you're by yourself, it's easy to ignore what's happening. It's easy to become numb. It's easy to say, "It's not that serious." But when you're connected with people, their pain wakes you up. You begin to feel what they feel, and you begin to see what you could not see alone. Mordecai didn't keep quiet. The people didn't hide their grief. They responded together. Some of us are too disconnected to feel urgency. We walk past pain, we ignore burdens, we minimize what God is trying to show us. But when you're in real community, you don't ignore pain. you help carry it. You don't dismiss problems, you respond to them. And you don't stay numb, you wake up. When a community recognizes the burden together, it creates the beginning of a breakthrough. A little over a year ago, this church leadership team took a survey of what our church thought was some of our community's biggest needs, and we took the top 3 items and made it our goal and our priority to address them. You all said our community has a big population that struggles with addiction and homelessness. Let me tell you, I had no idea. I work from home, and I live in this parking lot. So I had no sense of urgency until my community brought it to my attention. But now we have pop-ups hosted here that serve part of our homeless community. And now we have Breaking Chains that helps with families dealing with addictions. One of the other areas our church identified was the young people. We now have teen night every other Friday. And like Ebe said, this past Friday, we had 21 youth here for a teen night. And last month, we kicked off YAM, the Young Adults Ministry. All this to say, this community, this Levittown Church of God community, is helping identify the burden so that there can be a breakthrough. So going back to Esther, she didn't know about the decree. She, like me, was living in her own parking lot. She didn't know what was happening outside the gates, but she saw Mordecai at the gate, because he's not allowed in, right? He's in sackcloth. So she sees him at the gate, and he is distraught. So she sends one of her friends, one of the eunuchs, to go see why he's so upset. And so we pick up in chapter 4, verse 8. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her and command her to go to the king to beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. And Hathach, the eunuch, went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and commanded him to go to Mordecai and say, this is a little bit of like that telephone game where they're going back and forth. And all the king's servants and all the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law, to be put to death, except the one whom the king holds out the golden scepter, so that he may live. But as for me, I have not been called to come to the king these 30 days. And they go back and tell Mordecai what Esther had said. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. When Esther first hears what is happening, she's hesitant. She understands the risk. Going before the king without being summoned could cost her life. So she hesitates. It makes sense. But this is where Mordecai steps in. He sends a message to Esther that is not soft, not flattering, and not comfortable. Do not think that you will escape. If you remain silent, relief will arise from another place. And who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Mordecai tells Esther the truth that she did not want to face. A healthy community doesn't just comfort you, it calls you. If all you have are people who tell you what you want to hear, you will stay stuck in fear. Esther needed someone who loved her enough to challenge her. You need a Mordecai in your life, someone who will challenge your excuses, confront your fear, remind you of your calling, and refuse to let you shrink back. Isolation strengthens fear, but godly community is strengthening faith. Sometimes the breakthrough in your life begins when someone tells you the truth that you have been avoiding. So let's go back to Esther 4, verse 15. Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered them. After hearing Mordecai's words, Esther made a decision. She said, "Go, gather the Jews, and fast for me. Then I will go to the king, and if I perish, I perish." Before Esther steps into the palace, she calls on her people. Before she acts, she asks for intercession. Esther understood that her assignment required more than courage. It required spiritual support. She did not say, "I've got this." She said, "I need you." Some of us are trying to fight battles alone that were never meant to be fought alone. When the assignment is big, you need people praying for you, people fasting for you, people covering you spiritually, and people standing with you. Esther walked into the palace with confidence because she was backed by a praying community. This is why being part of a small group is so important. We need to surround ourselves with people who will pray for us and with us. So I'm going to do a quick recap. We're going to skip a little bit in the chapters. So Esther goes, she presents herself to the king and finds his favor, and he extends his scepter, indicating she's welcome and not going to be killed. Great news. And he asks her, "What can I do for you?" And she asks him if she can throw a small feast for him and Haman. He says yes, and they have a great dinner. And at the end of dinner, he asks what else she wants. And she says, "Let me throw another feast tomorrow for both of you again." And he says, "Okay." But later that night, he goes to bed and can't sleep. And he says, "Bring me a book to read. I'll do a little bedtime story, and it'll help me sleep." He comes across a history book, and it's his history book. And he comes across a very particular part of his history that he had forgotten. Cousin Mordecai, who he doesn't know is Esther's cousin, saved his life previously. And he said, "Advisors, what did we do to thank him?" And they said, "Absolutely nothing." So the next day, he goes and he says, Haman, bad guy, we don't like you. Haman, who's trying to kill Mordecai and all the Jews. And he says, "Haman, what should we do for someone who does something great for the king?" Not knowing he's talking about Mordecai, Haman's like, "Hey, we should parade him through town, dress him up in your clothes, make everyone know that you're super grateful for him." And the king says, "Great idea. Go and do that for Mordecai." So Haman parades Mordecai around town, and everyone gets to see how great Mordecai is. And this really puts a wrench in Haman's plans. His whole plot to kill the Jews is based on Mordecai not bowing. And he can't exactly kill the king's new friend. So after they've been around town and he's been celebrated, the king and grumpy Haman go to Esther's second dinner feast. And once they're all full and a little drunk, he asks Esther what else he can do for her. And we pick up in chapter 7, verse 3. Then Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be granted me for my wish, and my people for my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, to be annihilated. And if we had been sold merely as slaves, men and women, I would have been silent, for our affliction is not to be compared with the loss to the king." Then the king said to Queen Esther, "Who is he? Where is he? Who has dared to do this?" And Esther said, "A foe, an enemy, this wicked Haman." Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. Skipping ahead to verse 10, they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai, and the wrath of the king abated. So then the story goes on to say that on that super specific day when all the Jews were going to be destroyed, the king approved a letter that went out to the same groups of people, telling everyone the Jews can fight back and plunder and gather together and defend themselves against anyone trying to harm them. And not only on that super specific day, they can do it a second day too. And they do. And they demolish their attackers. And they also end up hanging Haman's 10 sons. So Esther goes before the king. She risks everything. And because of her obedience, God begins to move. Haman's plan is exposed. The king responds. The Jewish people are saved. But this was not just Esther's victory. This was a community's deliverance. They were all going to be wiped out, but they were saved. What God does through one person in community can impact many people. Esther had the position, but the people had the prayer. Your obedience is bigger than you think. When you say yes to God, it affects your family, your church, your community, generations after you. God often uses one person's courage, supported by community, to bring deliverance to many. And this reminds me so much of Breaking Chains, which meets here on Monday nights. It's a fellowship where people share their testimony of what God has brought them through. And it impacts so many other lives when they have the courage to share their story in a safe and supportive community to be able to present that. It impacts people and then generations and generations after it. So we're going to skip towards the end. Esther 9, verse 20 says, "And Mordecai recorded these things and sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces of the king, both near and far, obliging them to keep the 14th day of the month of Adar and also the 15th day of the same year by year, as the days on which the Jews got relief from the enemies, and as the month that had been turned for them from sorrow into gladness, from mourning into a holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and gladness, days for sending gifts of food to one another and gifts to the poor." So after their deliverance, the Jewish people establish Purim. They don't just move on, they remember together. They celebrate together. Community preserves testimony. If you keep what God has done to yourself, it can fade. But when you share it, it builds faith in others. We don't just need community for crisis. We need community for remembrance. We need people to celebrate with, to testify with, to give thanks with. What God brings you through should become part of a shared testimony. Testimony builds confidence and a track record. What God did for her, he can do for me. What he did last time, he can do again. I've seen him show up when we least expected it, so I know he will show up again. It gives us a reason to believe and the confidence to say he hasn't failed and he won't start now. The story of Esther is not just about a brave woman. It's about a connected people. Shared burden, spoken truth, united prayer, and collective breakthrough. Esther had influence, but she still needed community. She had opportunity, but she still needed support. She had access, but she still needed prayer. And so do we. So who in your life is your Mordecai? Who is speaking truth into your life? Who is praying for you? Who are you standing with? And who are you doing these things for? We were never meant to carry our callings alone. God may have placed you where you are for such a time as this, but he also placed people around you to help you walk it out. This message is for everyone, but as today is Mother's Day, I would like to bring it back around to that. Everyone here needs a community, like Esther had. But on this Mother's Day, I would like us to specifically be that community for the moms here. So as the kids are coming out, they're going to be standing with their parents or their family members who brought them. And our worship team is going to lead us in a song called The Blessing. This is a prayer. It is a prayer for who you're singing it over. You say, "Lord, bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you. May it give you strength." So I would pray, I say, may your face shine on Joe. Go before Joe. Go before Ken Lilly and generations and generations. This is a prayer. So find a woman near you, with kids or without kids, and with her permission, lay your hand on her shoulder or her arm or her seat back, and we are going to pray it or speak it over the women around you. If there is not a woman near you, stand up and find one. We are a community. You are not meant to be doing this alone. And we are going to pray blessing on their lives and God's provision for them and their families. We are going to actively be the praying community that Esther had.
Hey, thank you for taking the time and watching this video. I really hope that it blessed you. I hope you enjoyed it. Our goal is to come alongside you on your faith journey and support you and give you the tools that you need to grow. Because of that, we have a QR code right here for you. I'll love it if you scan that code. It'll take you to our church app where you can download the app for free. It has resources, it has messages and other tools and content that can help you grow in your walk with God. While you're at it, do me a favor. Can you like and subscribe right here and share this video to your friends, your colleagues, your family? You know, you have someone in your life that needs to hear this message that you just heard. And finally, if you're ever in the Bucks County, Pennsylvania area, we will love it if you stop by Levittown Church of God. We're in Levittown, Pennsylvania, and I would love to meet you in person. God bless you. Continue to read the Bible, continue to pray, and continue to grow.